All right, good afternoon. It's March 24th, 2018. Today joined by Uno-san, Takahashi-san, and we are going to discuss the role of new technology in the future of Japan. We have, in previous session, we have been looking at basically the situation where Japan is in a demographic situation where we have a rapidly aging society. We need to basically make sure that the younger generation will be able to support the elder generation, and in order to do that, we need to be actually grow our GDP per head, our output per working person, in order to support a growing number of elderly people. Well, what that means is that there is a kind of a doom scenario, but looking at the forecast, we actually see that it's forecasted that GDP will remain more or less stable. And the reason for that being that the technology will enable young people to produce more than they do today, be more productive. Technology like we have been looking at last week, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, self-driving vehicles, biotechnology, you name it. There are lots of technologies out there that look very promising, and they looking at the past and industrial revolutions and income changes, then we can be hopeful that these technologies will actually grow the GDP per head, and that will make sure that Japan doesn't need to worry too much about the future. So today we will look at have a quick look at the past, see what was the impact of the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, the second Industrial Revolution. What effect did it have on income distribution, and then looking at so what exactly will the future look like? And I think it will be a very, very interesting discussion. So without further ado, let's get started. Make this big. So the title of this series is New Technology and the Future of Japan. So first of all, why does innovation matter? One of my favorite economists, Paul Krugman, says about innovation: productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. So productivity is the basis of economic growth. So the output per head basically determines a lot. And why is that? A country's ability to improve its standard of living over time depends almost entirely on its ability to raise its output per worker. Most countries don't have extensive mineral wealth or oil reserves like Japan, and thus can't get rich by exporting them. So the only viable way for societies to become wealthier, to improve the standard of living available to its people, is for their companies and workers to keep getting more output from the same number of inputs. Innovation is how this productivity growth happens. Well, this productivity idea, what Krugman is referring to, is the mainstream productivity idea. It's based on Solow, a Nobel Prize winner, which says there's a production function. We'll get back to that, but the production depends on the inputs, labor, and capital, and the way that they work together. And the only way that you can grow your income is to actually grow your productivity, and that will shift your income curve upward, and that will allow for more savings, more investment, and thereby growing your economy, even if you are in a mature state like Western society, United States, Europe, and also Japan. basically innovation is important because it's the only way that we can actually make sure that we grow our income per head. So how can we improve our productivity? There are actually, when we think about innovation, we tend to think about technology, about what we were looking at last week, about internet technology, about the invention of steam engine, things like that, invention of the telephone. Those types of innovation are on everybody's mind when they talk about innovation. But there actually have been a number of innovations. So innovation is not only technology. There are more types of innovation. You have the like going back a long way, but the symbolic innovation. So we had the alphabet first. That enabled us to communicate, write things down, and transfer information from one person to the other. That was a big innovation. But today we have software that enables you to interface with the computer. Instead of writing zeros and ones, we are now able to write software in a human, easy to understand, easy to grasp human nature. So that is an example of symbolic innovation. Domestication. That's also a very big innovation, actually. The domestication of wild animals and plants. Technological innovation. New organization.
What do you mean, domestication?
Domestication. Basically, we were hunters before, hunters and gatherers, and the domestication allowed us to basically settle down and breeding, and but also basically holding cattle in one place, farming land. That allowed us to settle down and to work on the land and to specialize, because before that we were just moving around like Bedouins today. Technology is new organizations in combinations. Combinations is very important, and we will look a lot in depth of detail regarding the combinations and what that means. Institutionals, like for example methods, the double entry system in bookkeeping, just-in-time inventory, Kaizen. Organizational formats, like for example the corporation with its shareholders and its legal framework, forms of governance, and for example the constitution, product standards, ISO norm, all these things, they are also very important innovations that help us to sustain, for example, technological innovation. If innovation would not be rewarded and could easily be copied without giving any benefits to the innovator, then there would be maybe less innovation. So institutional innovation was necessary to support the technological innovation. Explanations, that's another innovation, and an important one is basically, how does the universe work? Newton, Darwin, Einstein, they came up with standard, with very fundamental principles that helped us to explain how the world works, and based on that we are now capable of coming up with a slew of new innovations based on those findings. So that actually also is very important type of innovation. So all these things need to work together. I would actually claim that probably the whole economic science is based on Newton, and the way that we were trying to make this into a science, but perhaps that's not really justified. Economics is not really a science. It's not a matter of physics, but we try to give the impression that economics is a science and is functions exactly like physics, like for example the invisible hand, where there's always a balance between supply and demand. Well, we know that is not actually the case, but it was Adam Smith made this theory popular, and it's now on everybody's mind. So we have this abstraction of and the idea that, okay, this is how the economy works based on physical principles that we learned in physics. But is that really justified? Is that really a good approximation of how the economy really works? We'll get back to that later.
How do you categorize robotics or AI in this?
Technological.
Or technological?
Technological, yes.
How about biotechnology?
Biotechnology is also technology.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically we're focusing on the technological one. We're also going to focus on the institutional one, because I think those are the most important one, and perhaps on the symbolic one, when I want to drill down on blockchains. Blockchain technology. Yeah, it's a kind of code, a way of how we manipulate, store data. It's technology and symbolic. So they work together. Each type of invention facilitates and is facilitated by the other. So one doesn't go without the other. So they need each other. So it's very important that when you look at, for example, we need to develop more technology, that we also need to provide the framework and the conditions in which that technology can thrive. That's often forgotten, and it's also something that we need to consider when we look at the role of technology in Japan. So how well is Japan organized, for example, in terms of institutions, explanations? Well, we know, for example, we have been discussing about that before, about norms, about the product standards. How well does Japan fit its norms? How well does it play with the norms in the rest of the world? So phases of technological innovation. So looking back a little bit, okay, what was the impact of technological innovation? So in the early modern mechanization phase, so between 1450 and 1750, that was the period before the Industrial Revolution. Involved cottage-based putting out sheds in cottages with hand-powered textile machines and a few water-powered textile manufactories. So that was very low mechanization, a little bit, just a few machines. We are really talking about England here. France, for example, was not nearly as far. England has been a leader in this field. And Flanders also had kind of an industry here, but most of it was still a pre-industrial area. Then the second is the early factory phase between 1770 and 1820. Was proto-factories, growing in number and size, largely powered by water wheels, with a few powered by steam engines. The focus continued to be on the textile production. So we were using water power and steam power to, basically to power the textile industry. Then between 1820 and 1880, the steam-driven factory phase involved the widespread diffusion of steam engines. So we only saw it in the textile industry, but then it started to diffuse to other factories. And in transportation, including railways and ships, as well as substantial expansion of the number and amount of goods produced in factories. So this is really the first industrialization phase. Then the science-led industrial phase between 1818 and 1975 was characterized by inventions derived from scientific laws, which provided a material foundation for massive economic growth. Key inventions included steel, chemicals, internal combustion engines that we're still working on, and electrical motors. So that is the second. And we can say that the steam-driven factory phase is more or less driven from England, and the science-led industrial phase was more or less led by the United States.
When is the Industrial Revolution?
Industrial Revolution is we will come back to that when we look at the video, but an industrial revolution is basically a combination of
You're talking about the last stage?
Right. So there's the first industrial revolution. That's the one between 1820 and 1880, and then from 1880 to 1975, that's the second industrial revolution. And now I would like to focus on the third industrial revolution, what it will look like globally, and what the impacts will be of that industrial revolution on society as a whole, and how we are organizing our society, and what impact that will have. The information technology. The last quarter of the 20th century saw the emergence of the information and computer technology revolution. The development of products and processes that rely on managing the movement of electrons from communication and analysis. If mechanization provided means to extend and magnify a human brain, information technology offers the means to extend and magnify the workings of the brain. So this is really... it's not really a movement of things. The ICT revolution is the management of information. That was the focus. ICT was a way to store and distribute information, and not so much things. Now comes the second machine age. Computers and other digital advances are doing for mental power the ability to use our brains to understand and shape our environments. What the steam engine and its descendants did for muscle power, they are allowing us to blow past previous limitations and taking us into a new territory. So basically the first industrial, the steam power, the combustion engine, they helped us to extend our muscle power. The ICT helps us to extend our brain power.
Instead of steam engine.
Well, basically this information technology revolution, what we saw before the industrial revolution, helped us to enhance our physical power with the help of engines.
You said muscle power.
Right, muscle power, and the ICT revolution actually helped us to develop our brain power. Not only by the access of information, but also by sharing information and by enabling us to collaborate much more intensively with people, and enabling us basically to create global networks. Without ICT technology, that would be very, very difficult to create a global supply chain, for example. We need the ICT component in order to manage that effectively. In the current ICT revolution, 8 of the 14 largest IT companies and 7 of the 10 largest internet companies worldwide are based in the US. So the US is leading the pack in this revolution. Now so this is very briefly about the industrial revolution. Now looking at GDP and economic growth. So GDP measurements, by Kuznets, an economist, is one of the great inventions of the 20th century. GDP gives an overall picture of the state of the economy. Without measures of economic aggregates like GDP, policy makers would be adrift in a sea of unorganized data. The GDP and the related data are like beacons that help policymakers to steer the economy towards the key economic objectives. So they're basically Kuznets, but we all know the Keynesian equation. GDP equals consumption plus investment, government spending, import, export. It all seems very, very simple, and it gives a good objective. So if the value of Y of GDP grows, then your economy grows. So it basically gives clear objectives and the clear instruments with which you can steer and measure the economy. But many aspects of the nation's economic well-being are difficult to measure. For example, positive caveats means like holes in our perception include lower search costs for information and goods, radical jumps in computing power at no extra cost, significant lower transaction costs for information search, and increases in educational attainment. So that's how do you measure that? How do you grasp that? How do you monetize that? The value of Google, for example. How do you estimate the value of internet? It's very difficult to grasp that and to reflect that value into a figure as the GDP.
Actually, this sentence means actually they reduce cost of company.
Yes, exactly. They reduce cost of company, but it's also accessible to people. It brings ideas to people. People can are more empowered. They have a global. They can have a global reach if they want. They can be educated. They can. There are so many things that they can do, but it's not reflected in our GDP measurement.
By the way, for example, in Africa, in many cases, local farmers try to get drinking water.
Right.
Taking drinking water, they by man transport for a couple hours, 1 hour.
Right.
Taking water,
right.
And then different locations. Over time goes by, they're switching from man to tank rolling.
Right.
And then getting improvement, but it doesn't affect for GDP.
Right.
Right.
It doesn't affect GDP. Yeah, exactly. So that's a key of it. So we don't measure that. So the point here being is that we think that we have something that can grasp all the economic value, but the economy doesn't measure that. Basically, the fact that we can buy computers almost at the same price, but the computers can do twice as much as they can do last year or the year before that, because our processes have become faster. It doesn't mean that our computer companies are making a lot more money, but basically the consumers get a lot more value for their money. By the way, that drinking example was very interesting. This morning I saw something on the internet. A friend of mine, he speaking of innovation, a friend of mine, he sent me an email, and he's I met him in Japan. We met on a couple of occasions. He's now in the process of bringing devices to refugee camps.
What kind of device?
Device to extract water from the air.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a speaker at the World Economic Forum, and he's trying to basically raise money to bring these machines to refugee camps, because there is very often very difficult to access this kind of like clean water, and people sometimes need to buy water and they don't have any money. So to make water available to these people can mean a lot. So they installed the first machine, I believe, in Lebanon, with so many Syrian refugees there.
By the way, those kind of technology will not impact for any cost of GDP, because, like, for example,
I think it may, because actually we can use the same technology to irrigate the Sahara Desert, for example.
But it doesn't. The Sahara Desert, they're going to increase arable land. Okay, so
right.
this is just effective for the GDP increase.
Right.
But like what you said, it's kind of, they try to get water from air, nothing happens. And also same thing happens. Many kind of technology will not impact for GDP. And but if they can do this, child mortality drastically reduce.
Right.
But child mortality reduce, but it doesn't affect for GDP. Okay, I tell you. For example, in Africa, every family going to make a children 9 to 10 child, and they cannot going up to the more than 5 years old. 40% will dead. Okay, so that's supposed to be 40% to 20%, 10%.
Right.
Okay.
They'll get less fewer children.
But I tell you, if you're going to make many child, what happens is going to get increased more poverty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if reduce mortality, it means more poverty. Right. So which one is good? This is no effect for GDP. GDP is getting lower.
But
so
actually,
I tell you, let me see. Some cases, okay, innovative some tools, okay, like he said, like water, making water from air, or seawater to pure water. This kind of technology will going to good impact for Africa, but this case is they can get some survival for children is drastically increased mortality reduced, then population increase is going to increase poverty. This is true. Okay, this is proven.
But they will get less children.
No. This is Africa. Is
if more children survive, they will get fewer
Africa's
children.
most concern is how to reduce number of children, but none of the country cannot control. Okay, they try to give them training, education, no impact.
I think the only way to reduce the number of kids is to give pensions.
No, you don't understand. You still don't understand Africa. They have a lot of 1/3 of the country is heavy unrest. Okay, and the other 1/3 of the country is government not stable. So this country is if you're going to give them something, money, useless. This is not the money power issue. Why are they going to make many children? Because anytime they're going to be killed, so they can make children. They're going to make
right. So that's why I say we give them pensions or give them some kind of security and stability, and the number of children will dramatically.
This is impossible. Like Congo is currently they're going to start war, domestic war. But domestic war is started. How are you going to give them stability? It's impossible. So, the young girl is going to prostitute, young boy going to soldier. This is the world. This is the world. So how are you going to do that? In many people, like Japanese government is going to invest Africa. Okay, we're going to give you. How are you going to reduce poverty? Nonsense. This is if they're going to spend $300 million, there's nothing happen there. This is the current problem.
Sure, but I mean, there's a lot of nations. What
I wanted to say is kind of lots of issues will nothing impact for GDP. Okay, world happening. Many issues is no impact for GDP, but GDP is one of measurement.
Right.
How companies growing and related. For example, Congo is GDP per person is per capita is $400. Very poor. Japan is 36,000. And 100. Consider 100. This what we going to do for them? Nothing we can do. 400. Okay, under the survival line, under more than 50% people is under poverty line.
Yeah,
it means
$1 a day.
Exactly, they can survive. That's the reason why they're going to make child.
Right.
Or the race survival.
Right. So
right?
that's why. But
so this doesn't matter. For
the only way that they can change that is bring stability, make sure that people get more wealthy, and then the number of children will decrease.
Wait a minute. Elimination of poverty or more wealthier life is you can say that it's easy, but what kind of tools, what kind of action we should take? This is difficult.
But we have been seeing that all over the world that poverty has been reduced dramatically. So when I was a kid, 2/3 of the world was hungry.
No, you must. Which country is going to reduce poverty? The big reason, okay, big reduction is because it's only China. Don't mistake.
Right. Well, China is
global average, okay. Like UNESCO, like kind of data, global average data is bad. You just carefully watch. Only China. Africa, nothing happened.
But not only China.
Africa, nothing.
Well, in Africa is lagging behind. That I have to admit that. But also China, Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia. There are a lot of countries that are growing out of poverty very rapidly.
No. I just studied global democracy. I get to know what happened now with Philippines. Their GDP per capita is drastically increased. What's happened? Just only rich person get more richer. People is in Filipino, nothing changed for the past 10 years. And many people misunderstand. Like Philippines is GDP per capita is more than $3,000. Vietnam is $2,000. Which country is ordinary people is richer? Vietnam.
Yeah, I immediately believe that.
Philippines is miserable. Why? It's because these people rich.
Right.
That's the reason Duterte tried to do something right. They tried to kill narcotic traffickers. They already killed 3,000, 4,000 people.
Yeah.
A lot of people criticize him, but this is the reason why. Those people rich, right? So just he tried to eliminate those guys, right? So very difficult to make judgment, even GDP per capita.
Right.
GDP itself, all the same thing happen. Okay, you just think about that. You compare with Japan, 36,000 US dollars compared to Singapore, or 50,000 US dollars is almost 1.5 times Singaporean people, older people rich. I don't think so. So this is, I think, but I tell you, GDP information is very important. Japan is also, unfortunately, it's not so many rich people in Japan. Okay? Not like America, not like France, not like Singapore. So it means 37,000 US dollars is almost very close to average people living. Right? So, and many people criticize Japan is no growth past 20 years. And also I made a presentation 2 days ago at the NTT data. The general manager asked me, how come Japan is no increase since 1980? Of course, main reason, but do we need more GDP per capita? I don't think so. Just, you said basic income. Okay, Japan, we can give them the basic income 10 years later if after the robotics, AI innovation. Okay, they can reduce 30% of global countrywide cost reduction. Maybe, I don't know how much money, but I tell you, but Japan, we don't need to going to increase to 50,000 per capita, 60,000 per capita. We don't need to do that. 37,000 per capita is good. Everybody satisfied in Japan, right? And also, this is, I think, in future it's very similar to the Northern Europe. I think this is a Japanese future image of our country. But only the 500,000 people, if you are going to go outside and doing business at global level, okay, you can do that. But Japan is not a globalized country, just pure domestic country. So this GDP means that means okay, meaningful, right? But if you're going to compare with country by country, GDP is some meaning. You need to prepare some assumption. Otherwise, like Vietnam, Philippines is a good example. Okay, if Philippines, because what I saw that Philippines airport to downtown Philippines will take 3 hours. Vietnam from airport to downtown just only 30 minutes. Why Vietnam is not traveling? This is because they developed their country, highway and everything better than Philippines. Philippines no highway. What's happened? I saw that because Philippines is more richer than Vietnam. No, rich people, only rich people. Vietnam is everybody equal, right? Socialist country, right? That's the reason why they are even GDP per capita is so small, but they are very rich. So this is my conclusion. On Africa, is many people misunderstand how much money they get. Very few. Okay, very few. And also in Africa, almost all countries and civil war. Past 10 years, 20 years, some countries 50 years. Now recently we're settling down. Still Congo, they started again.
Well,
right, right.
Western Africa. Oh, a lot of countries are rather stable.
No, yes, gradually now it's going to stable. So they can looking for the future. For them now they're going to touch in the economy and they try to consider for manufacturing now. And textile, they're going to start. Like Ethiopia just started, but some other country going to start.
Right, because Ethiopia already they also had civil war, but after they separated from Eritrea, and that's already more than 20 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, but still very poor.
Yeah, well, I was surprised. It was much less poor than I thought it was. Ethiopia, even when I was there in '95.
Better than Congo. It's about
it's much better.
But still $2,000 per person.
Congo was at the time was very very yabai and Tondemanai country, but Ethiopia was much better than I expected. A lot of other countries. Okay, if you zoom down on very specific areas in Kenya, there is also poverty and there is a lot of crime and uncertainty. But in a lot of everything outside that.
Oh, Kenya case is very just
No war for a long time.
Kenya.
Mismanagement, yes, but no war.
Kenya?
Hmm.
No, all the way past 40 years they are struggling for the unrest of political unrest. Okay, and Kenyatta and Odinga still since father's era for 30-40 years they are struggling, politically struggling. So economy is not stable. So this is currently last year Kenyatta won, but still Odinga against it. So no stable now.
Right, but I mean it's nothing like a civil war. I mean there's unrest left and right, but they have a long period with Arap Moi and Kenyatta. I mean there's a lot to be said against him, but at least it was rather
But
stable.
the economy is slugging.
Slugging. It's not good.
And no
But it's
manufacturing.
the same in Tanzania. It's also the economy is not good, but
Every
it's
country
stable.
is the same. Okay, I tell you, every country is the same. South America is the exception, but North Africa is different. But Central Africa, East South Africa, East West Africa is just going to start for the political step.
Yeah, sure. It's
Okay, just going to start.
it's way behind.
And
that.
also recently I'm trying to write in South America. South America is their independence is very early, 100 years earlier than Africa, but they are second. Every country is still no growth.
South America.
South America no growth.
Yeah.
And why is South America case different from Africa? It's typically the bribe, fraud,
Yes.
corruption.
Also I think maybe
Do you-
colonialism
do
has
you
to
know
do with
that-
it.
Do you know that Kuczynski is resigned?
No, actually,
Peru.
so I didn't know.
Okay, Peru. Kuczynski very good person, and because of corruption, and he's very good person, but unfortunately, he's
Kuczynski sounds like he's from Eastern Europe.
oh yeah, maybe, and he's a bribe, and he's 80 years old, very old, very similar to the age of Mugabe.
But why is that in Peru? Like they had a Japanese prime minister. They have
Now
from
it's,
everywhere, but not really South American names.
I don't know, but next is so they're going to election again. So Keiko Fujimori. will
Yeah,
going to
Fujimori
be-
again.
Yeah.
Daughter.
Keiko Fujimori will going to be the president. Do you know that? Parliament, 2000 Parliament is in favor for Keiko Fujimori. And Kuczynski won because his message is very good. Okay, I listened to his 1 hour presentation. He's very good.
Okay.
But I tell you that, okay, back to the GDP.
Right.
GDP is, we don't find a very good measurement, but the GDP is in the history, everybody agrees
Yeah,
with that.
it's a good measurement, but it's very imperfect.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But,
It's very imperfect. So
but your example, picking up that just one of those.
no. So there is a positive examples. Okay, the things that we do not count, but actually add to our economic growth. For example, the computing power, the IT technology. The negative things are climate change, health costs, financial costs of high unemployment, things like that. They are also not in our GDP measurement. So basically, GDP is very limited, but we put all the importance on GDP. So my point here is that we should be careful to translate everything to a GDP number.
Okay. This is my understanding.
Yeah, I think we mean the same thing. So since this is a growth figure of, can you see it? It's not very clear. So since the Industrial Revolution, the world has experienced an unprecedented rise in economic growth that has been fueled by innovation. So we have the first Industrial Revolution and the second Industrial Revolution, and we see that actually after the first Industrial Revolution started a growth and was drastically.
What the first means? What's happened to the first industrial revolution?
Steam engine. Actually, we'll get back to that. It meant basically going mainstream of the steam engine, coal-powered steamships, railway. Railway. So the efficient steam engine. So we have the basically here there was not so much going on. Then the printing press was invented in Germany, or some Dutch people claim it was invented in the Netherlands, but it probably was Germany. Then in 1698, the invention of the steam engine, but that needed some time before it was actually became an efficient machine. Mostly applied to the textile industry. Then it goes mainstream, and a lot of machines in different kinds of industries are being set up and used to increase output. Then the internal combustion engine and oil basically comes to thrive and becomes the engine behind the second industrial revolution. Now we're looking at the income distribution. New technology drives income. So at the top we see the Dutch hegemony, then the British hegemony, and then the US hegemony. So we see that the British hegemony led to higher GDP per capita because of the Industrial Revolution, because the British were the engine, were the center of the first Industrial Revolution. They managed to surpass the GDP per head of the Dutch, and then they were rapidly overtaken by the United States. They created a hegemony. So there is a clear correlation between the GDP per head and the nation where the Industrial Revolution took place.
What's this has scale?
Oh, this is Japan, by the way. Japan.
1,000 US dollars?
Scale.
1,000 US dollars? No. 1 million.
Wait.
1 million. 4 million.
If I get, I need to get this.
US is 50,000.
Yeah, it's now. Yeah, so that should be in $10,000. But I don't know what the base year is actually, to be honest with you. Maybe that is today.
No China.
No China. But the data is rather old, as you can see. It ends here in 1997. But we can see Japan here growing very rapidly from 2050.
If you can read 1990 to 1992, you can read 1990 to 2010.
Right.
This Japanese line is similar to China.
Right.
This kind of sort of graph is I'm very much interested in America's protectionism. What direction is going to next 5 years? What's going to happen? They close their country. They try to close their country, right? What's happening?
Well, that's a very interesting question.
I want to hear from you. What's your opinion?
Well, I'm going, and that's actually going to. That will take a long discussion, but I think we are. We'll see less and less influence of national governments in the years ahead of us because of the technological revolution, because of the way that the world is developing, and the national governments will become less and less relevant, and there is more and more like a vertical empowerment of people. We no longer need to rely on vertical structures and more on horizontal structures, because the technology will allow us to do that, which means that I think that the tariffs and things like that, they cannot be maintained very easily, because consumers will not allow it, and it's ultimately the consumers that will drive this. I think the wave of protectionism of the United States will be short-lived and will be reversed. I think we are in some kind of an end game of the second revolution, and we are at the verge of a new way that we're going to organize a society that is in line with the new wave of technology that will drive that will facilitate that.
So what's the impact for America?
The impact for America is that basically their influence worldwide will decrease. I think there will be a movement from nations against nations to more regional-based politics. So basically a shrinking regional-based politics with a global reach, global collaboration, but not so much nation against nation. It's also.
But America don't want to trade outside the country, right?
Well, basically, I think they want to trade if they can benefit from it, but they don't feel that they benefit from it.
Right? It means actually the European people don't want to deal with them.
Right. Basically, Europe doesn't want to. If the United States doesn't want to play along and only wants to take benefits and not basically meet them halfway, then why would Europe make any concessions and not go the same way? So basically, raising tariffs, starting protectionism, is very destructive.
How do you think about China and the United States?
I think China is actually much more eager to open the economy and to keep the global economy open.
Yeah.
So basically, that will mean that China will and the Chinese citizens will gain much more influence relative to the United States if they're going to maintain it. But Uno-san, I don't think that this will be long-lived. This kind of political movement. How long? I think Trump will be out in a year.
You mean another couple of years?
No, I don't think that. I think that there will be that will give rise to a radical new movement. I think that people will very quickly be fed up with Trump and his protectionism and his America First principle. Because America is in the position, or is in under the wrong assumption that the world revolves around them, but it will not. And a lot of people in the United States will see that.
Especially California.
Right. Well, California is a different country within the United States, basically. It's a completely different culture. Completely different culture. So, maybe there will be Trump supporters, but there will all be like where his voter base is, like in the Midwest and not along the coast, not on the East Coast, not on the West Coast. A lot of people will ask themselves, okay, am I an American or am I an inhabitant of Milwaukee, or am I part of this region? And what does it mean? What do I need from my country? What really matters to me is what happens around me. And
but his next election is 2020, right?
Right.
2 years later.
Right. I wonder whether he will make it. I don't
Really?
think he will last that long.
But he just he doesn't have. It's difficult for him to act.
It's difficult, but it can be done. It can be done. I would be very surprised if he can last that long. I mean, what he's doing right now, what is really, like, the guy is under fire and under pressure everywhere. I don't think he has many friends left from the team that he got together initially. That everybody's gone. He brought in total nitwits on very important positions. He had a pretty strong team behind him when he started. I thought that basically gave the world a little bit of an assurance, and the people in the United States, well, okay, he may be an idiot, but the people his lieutenants, they were at least capable people with experience and knowledge. But what he's doing right now is I think shows that he's totally out of control, and he's basically just trying to take out all the opposition away from his own party, and he makes, I think that shows that he's under a lot of pressure. And
but his character, he never said from him he will resign.
Right. That's, but how far can you take it? I've never been president, but I think that there comes a time when you say, okay, well, basically I cannot do anything anymore.
Okay, let's move.
Right. So, message here is that there is a very clear connection between new technology, technological revolutions, and income per head for the nation. So there seems to be a positive relationship between the two of them. But there's also divergence. When we're looking at the productivity and real median family income growth between 1947 and 2011. We look at the productivity here, and we look at the real median family income, we see that actually they have started to grow apart since roughly around 1975, 1979. So between the end of World War II and the mid-1970s, U.S. households fully benefit from the steadily increase of productivity. There was a strong position of the labor unions, and basically every rise in productivity was translated in higher incomes. However, while productivity increases have continued over the last 4 decades, median household income has been relatively stagnant. The labor share of income has declined. This suggests that of late the benefits of invention have not been evenly distributed in the US.
Yeah, of course. Why?
Why? Well, if we have to believe Solow, then the productivity function of Solow says that productivity, the production, can be measured as the output of labor input and capital input. So that means that if labor rewards, the labor component that has not increased, then the reward for capital must have increased, right? But there's another element in there, and we're going to look at the video in a bit, that also tells another story. Basically, the rewards for the increase in productivity have not gone to the labor component, hardly gone to the labor component, but have all flown towards the people who have capital, the investor. And a labor share of income in the non-farm business, so in the secondary and tertiary sector, we see that the labor share in income is also decreasing. So this basically tells the same story. We see that this is on the decline.
What means labor share of income?
So there is less of the total income. So we have income as for example interest on loans, and wages and profits from speculations. So labor is only one component of income, and we see that of the total income, wages have actually decreased.
It means middle class people income no increase.
Right.
Reason is labor share is reducing. It means rich people will get more money.
Right. That's exactly what it means. So there is a few people who got a lot richer, and the average person didn't get richer. Now, again, going back to what we discussed before, there are things that are not included in our GDP that we cannot see here. We cannot see the effects of environmental pollution. We cannot see the effects of the information technology and the access that people have, and the value that they get from their computers today relative to what they got 10, 15 years ago. But looking at GDP, there is a problem, and workers have not been included in the economic growth. One can see an unprecedented and dramatic upturn in the global standard of living that was initially catalyzed by the first industrial revolution, greatly magnified by the second industrial revolution, and further heightened in the recent age of information technology. So, with IoT, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence, biotech, etc., we must be heading for a new period of raising productivity, economic growth, and prosperity, right? Right?
Right.
That's the question. But what is actually happening? Looking at the American output per hour of work is growing more slowly than it has since the early 80s. Actually, with all the new technology, we would expect that productivity is growing, but productivity is actually is declining. The productivity growth is declining. How come? Why is that? What's happening here?
Why?
Yeah, that I'm building it up.
Is it productivity?
Yeah. Productivity. One word of warning. It's not very easy to measure. Okay, how productive is a worker who is working for Facebook, for example? How to measure that? The services industry, the component is getting bigger. So how productive is somebody who's working for Facebook?
Well, yeah.
Productivity is declining.
This one is based upon labor workers' productivity.
Right. This is American. This is American.
Manufacturing and service sectors.
Right. So this is this excludes the farming, for example. But in spite of new technology, the output per worker is decreasing. What is happening here? What gives? From 2011 to 2015, the government's labor productivity measure shows only 0.4% annual growth in output per hour of work. That's the lowest for a 5-year span since the 1977 to 1982 period, and far below the 2.3% average since the 1950s. So, labor productivity, there is a problem. There is something strange going on. That even though we have technological progress, we see a decrease in labor productivity.
It's the same one?
It's basically, it tells the same story.
Why this shows no productivity growth, no change?
Because actually the labor productivity growth is slowing down, and it's expected to stay low for another 20 years.
Why slowing down?
Well, okay, shall we have a look at the video?
Yeah. Just one second.
Okay, I will put it to Okay. Well, maybe he needs to go drinking then.
No, he fly from Myanmar to Bangladesh today.
Ah, okay.
His flight is 5:30. So maybe as soon as he finishes meeting, he join with us. And she needs to leave at 5.
Right. Okay. All right. So about productivity from 2011 to 2015, the government's labor productivity measure shows only a 0.4% annual growth in output per hour of work. So that's the lowest of 5-year span since 1977 to 1982, when it was also very low. Far below the 2.3% average since the 1950s. If this kind of productivity growth persists indefinitely, our grandchildren would be no richer than us. Will we? Well, no. No? Why no? Well, unless what?
By the way, I have curiosity. Why grandchildren is poorer than...
Will be no better off. So it doesn't say poorer. But they will not be better off than we are.
Why productivity, increase productivity increase?
So basically what's happening is that what we see in the recent years is that as world GDP rises, so its production is rising, the demand for oil rises exponentially, so rises faster. 3 key features are the low price elasticity of demand. That means that if the price of oil rises, it doesn't mean that we start to consume a lot less. Basically, the cost of oil is just increasing, and oil is in everything.
My simple question is GDP is growth every year, right?
Right.
Increasing. But how come productivity is not growth?
Well, that's oil.
Oil price?
Right. The strong growth in demand from China and Middle East and other newly industrialized countries is also putting a strain on the oil price. And the failure of the global production to increase. These facts explain, like for example, we had the shale oil, but all the shale oil companies they're going belly up, right? Iran has Saudi Arabia decides to increase the production, keep the prices low, and all of these shale operations they cannot make enough money to sustain their business. So these facts explain that the initial strong pressure on prices may have triggered a commodity speculation in the first place. So if we see a GDP price, it's expected that the prices will rise. So we see GDP rise, then it's very likely that the oil price will rise. So with the rise in GDP, we see also speculation in oil. That also supports a high oil price.
It means last 5 years, America has got a lot of oil.
Right.
So they increase their GDP?
America, well, not that much. They increased their GDP, but not that much.
They just suddenly they got oil.
Well, no, actually, you mean shale oil?
Yeah.
Yeah, but shale oil cannot. To extract shale oil requires a global market price that is actually above the current global market price. So OPEC.
No, I'm talking about they are they're from the world number 3 countries for the shale oil production.
Yeah, but shale oil.
Even the price is low, but their amount of money is huge.
Yeah, but shale oil cannot be extracted, and there's no valid business for shale oil if the price is below. I don't know exactly what the price is.
Yeah, I know.
So hold the shale operation is
no,
basically.
No, I'm talking about current production rate level is one of the third level of the production there now.
Right,
Because
but then just
the
regular
price
crude.
is very increased, so now it's very strong, So they're pushing GDP rise, right? How come America GDP so much big jump compared with China?
You mean they go up?
Yeah, you said demand of oil rises, but actually America past 5 years almost zero to the world number 3 shale oil in production, right? Why this doesn't?
No, shale oil is not. The shale oil doesn't come from the ground.
What do you mean?
Well, shale oil. There was a lot of talk about shale oil, but at the current market prices, shale oil cannot be extracted.
What do you mean cannot be expected?
Because it's too expensive to take it from the ground. Well, basically, okay, if you want to start a shale oil operation, that basically that you can do that, but then if it costs $100 per barrel to extract shale oil, and the market price is below $100, then very soon, it's just like any other business. You will run out of business because it basically
you are talking about sales price and cost.
Right.
Okay, let me.
So, okay. So these facts explain the initial strong pressure on prices that may have triggered commodity speculation in the first place. Speculation could have edged producers like Saudi Arabia into the discovery that small production declines could increase current revenues and may be in the long run interest as well. As the strong demand may have moved us into a regime in which scarcity rents, while negligible in 1997, became perceived and most important permanent factor in the price of petroleum. Basically, what we're going at is when you look at the price of oil. Why is this important? That's basically because the way that we are measuring GDP, the way that we are measuring production, is ignoring the price of our raw materials, the price of we're looking at labor and capital. But oil plays a very, very, very important role. Actually, Solov himself admitted that only about 20% of production growth can be explained by labor and capital. So there is a so-called solo residual, and it seems to indicate what we see here is that if you see what you see here is that basically with the rise of the price in oil in 2008, it peaked at about close to $107 per barrel. The GDP was high, oil price started to rise. Then with the rise of the oil price, we see the GDP decline, and the oil price also declined. Then when the oil price was down, the GDP started to climb up again, but together with the rise in the GDP, we see a rise in the oil price, which looks like every time the GDP rises, we see a rise in the oil price. So every time we manage to grow our GDP, we manage to grow our production, we manage to grow our production capacity, we need oil. Because everything that we do is based on oil. Not only the transportation, but also the machinery, the energy. Oil is used in a lot of the products that we're using. So a rise in the oil price will have a big impact on economic growth and put a brake on it. So why is the economy not really taking off with the new technology? It seems like oil is putting a brake on our potential to actually grow. So there is this thing, okay, so what are we going to do about it? Is this the end of Western society? Is this the end of the second industrial revolution, where basically we are depending on the combustion engine and we are depending on oil to power our economy? Because it seems exactly that oil is also the brake on our economy. It's also the one that's stopping us from actually growing any further. So it looks like, looking at this graph, it looks like we are reaching some kind of end game regarding our the current era and the potential that technology has to actually grow the economy. So are we trapped? The data suggests that some of the increase in price of oil is attributed to the increase in demand for oil, and some of it by the desire of investors to diversify into physical commodities like oil. So it's some of it can be explained by the fact that GDP rises means that there is an increase in demand for oil, but it's also part of speculation. People put their money because they have seen that a rise in GDP will result in a rise in the price of oil. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So speculators are actually rising up the price further. Okay, so with much of the rest attributable to the expectation of future price and output increases likely to be engineered by quantitative easing. Basically, that is expected that we will, in order to offset this, governments will start to use the printing press and print more dollars, for example, in this case when we're talking about the United States. So there will be inflation is to be expected. So the higher oil price translates to higher costs for transportation, a lot of chemical products, which puts a brake on economic growth. According to Jeremy Rifkin, which is a political advisor for Europe and for China, we are approaching the end game of the fossil fuel economy and heading towards a third industrial revolution. Now, this is a long video, but it's a very, very, very interesting one. It's a very interesting.
Did you see?
Yes. Yeah, I saw it. Not once. I saw it twice. It's not an easy one. 1 hour and 45 minutes. But it's a good one. And I suggest we look at it because I think what he described in this video is very plausible. It's also what's actually currently is being implemented in the European Union. So this is the way that the European Union is developing. This is also what China is doing at the moment. So this will become very important in the world in the near future.
Are you going to show now?
Yes. Alright, so this video was shot. It shows Jeremy Rifkin. He wrote about 20 books, and he's a political advisor. It's basically he presents his ideas presented in his books in front of an audience of young people. It's a little bit dramatized. I think I don't really like the style, the way it's done, but his presentation is very, very impressive. He goes fast. It's not easy to understand, but I think that there's a lot in his argument that I believe is that makes a lot of sense. So today I want to look at the video, and then the question is, so what? The global economy is increasing. This is actually, this video was shot, I believe, about 3 years ago. So economists warn that we face another 20 years of declining productivity, slow growth, steep unemployment, and increasing inequality. Right, this is what we saw, right? The productivity numbers that are actually decreasing. Slow growth, high unemployment, and a wider gap because of the wage gap between productivity, the GDP, and the real wage per worker. The economic downturn is fueling growing discontent towards governing institutions. So we see that happening everywhere in Europe. Brexit, people voting for Trump, everywhere. The right-wing politicians are gaining in the elections. There are not that many countries that have a right-wing government, but extreme right-wing government. But they are a very strong political factor, and part of that is due to the discontent and general dissatisfaction of the public, and spawning extreme political movements around the world. And now, after 200 years of industrial activity, scientists report that climate change is ravaging the planet, taking us into the sixth mass extinction of species. Where do we go from here? So, stagnating economies, climate change, political discontent, bigger divide between haves and have-nots. So where does it take us? What does this mean for the future? This is, I believe, this was a presentation held in Boston, one of the universities there.
Interesting. They didn't bring chairs by himself.
Right.
Now he going to speak?
Yes.
Let me start on a very somber note. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. You'll have to judge. GDP is slowing all over the world, everywhere. And the reason is productivity has been declining for 20 years all over the world. The result, unemployment's very high everywhere. And nowhere is it more pronounced than among the millennial generation coming into the workforce. Our economists tell us that we can look forward to slow productivity and slow growth for the next 20 years. And let me do the math for you. At the end of two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, here's the equation. We have to admit that half the human race is far better off today than our ancestors were before we began this industrial experiment. Granted? Also, we need to acknowledge that 40% of the human race are making $2 a day or less, and arguably they are worse off than their ancestors were before the industrial experiment. And the final equation, the industrial era, while it's benefited half the human race and been a detriment to the other half of the human race, the well-off, the very wealthy, have done quite well. Today, the 62 wealthiest human beings in the world, we could put them in this little section of the room. The 62 wealthiest human beings in the world today, their combined wealth equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human population living on Earth. 3.5 billion people. There's something really dysfunctional about the way the human family is organizing its economic relationships on this Earth. It's clear we're in a long-term structural economic crisis at the end of the second industrial revolution. But now this industrial era has given rise to a much more profound crisis, an environmental crisis. We have spewed massive amounts of CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this planet to create this industrial way of life. And now we have so much CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere that it's blocking the sun's heat from getting off the Earth. We are in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory. This is no longer looming on the horizon. This is no longer imminent. Climate change is now at the house, in the door. What's terrifying about climate change, and unfortunately it's never explained, because if it were explained, our human family would be justifiably terrified and motivated and driven to begin to transform this planet. Climate change changes the water cycles of the Earth. That's what this is all about. It's never explained. We're the watery planet. Our satellite probes go to other planets, and what's the first thing we look for? Water. No water? Not interested. Recently, they discovered what they think is dirty water on Mars, and everybody is thrilled. Our ecosystems on Earth have developed over millions of years based on the water cycles, the cloud cycles that traverse them across the Earth. For every 1 degree that the temperature of the planet goes up because of industrial-induced CO2 emissions, for every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet, the atmosphere is actually sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing the precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation, more violent water events, but they're more infrequent, throwing the entire water cycle of the Earth off kilter. More blockbuster winter snows. 8 feet in Boston that last season? My gosh. More dramatic spring floods. That flood in the Carolinas, remember? They said this flood only will occur once every 1,000 years. It's the new normal. More prolonged summer droughts. My wife and I were in British Columbia, and we're coming into Vancouver, and the pilot says, we have some smoke coming in. And I turned to my wife and I said, he means smog. No, he meant smoke. Wildfires from British Columbia to California. Summer drought and wildfire. We have Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes now, so dramatic that they're destroying infrastructure and killing people all over the world. That hurricane that hit the Philippines, this was the most powerful hurricane ever recorded. This is the new normal. What I'm saying here is that climate change is dramatically changing the water cycles. They're on an exponential curve. This is absolutely frightening. It's terrifying. And if you are a young millennial about to start a family, if you're a parent here or a grandparent, I want you to listen to this. Our scientists now tell us that we are in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. This is the most dramatic story the human family has ever faced. There have been 5 mass extinction events on Earth in 450 million years, and each time the chemistry of the planet shifts very quickly. There's what we call a turning point and massive die-out. And after the massive die-out of life, it takes upwards of 10 million years to get new life back on Earth. Our scientists now tell us we are in the 6th extinction event. This is not a model, we're chronicling it in real time. And what they're saying is that over the next 7 decades, and many of you will be around for a lot of that, and your children will. In the next 7 decades, we could lose over half the species of life that now inhabit this little oasis in the universe. As my wife says, we just are not grasping the enormity of this moment. We might acknowledge climate change, but we're going on as business as usual with a little greenwashing. 99.5% of all the species that have ever been on this planet have come and gone. Those are not good odds. And what's interesting is human beings, we're the actual youngest species. We're the babies. Anatomically modern humans have only been here about 200,000 years. There's no guarantee we're going to make this. And the new studies that have just come out, they're even more terrifying because they're seeing the freshwater melts in the Arctic now, in Greenland, and now in Antarctica much quicker than we expected, changing the ocean currents. And they're talking about storms that are beyond anything we can imagine that we've ever seen in human history by the end of this century. We're talking about the major coastal cities where much of our urban population is underwater. This is not a century from now. This is in the lifetime of many young people who are 4 and 5 now, will be my age when we're in full steam into this new era, this abyss. So what do? We need a new economic vision for the world. It has to be compelling. We need a game plan to deploy that vision, and it needs to be quick. It needs to move as quickly in the developing countries as in the industrialized nations. If we have any chance of arresting the worst of this climate change, we're going to have to be off carbon in 4 decades, everywhere. This is beyond anything we're talking about at global conferences. How do we begin to tackle something of this magnitude? We need to step back and reflect on how the great economic paradigm shifts in history occurred. If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap here in this room and around the world, and we're going to get a compass that will allow us to navigate a new journey, to completely transform the way we handle life on Earth.
So, basically,
He's talking about climate change.
well, he's talking about climate change. He's talking about, so he's also talking about what's happening. So what is necessary? What are we doing here? Basically, it's not business as usual anymore. We are in real-time climate change. We really need to do something, or we can, if we keep on working along the same economic model, if we keep on relying on fossil fuels, then we might go extinct. So, what is the idea here? What's happening? And he's going to look back at history and look at the future and what the new third economic revolution will be like. Because basically, economics drives our behavior, right? And our current economic model has made us to completely ignore the side effects of our economic activity. So we haven't looked at the effect of our production on the world around us, because it was not part of the costs. Externalities were not part of our economic considerations. It doesn't cost us much to pollute the air. We put a price on everybody else, but for the polluter, it's a slight cost. So he said, okay, what we are doing here, but also, I mean, what we're seeing is happening with oil and with our fossil fuels. It's putting a brake on our economy and our economic system. It is basically the economic model as we have been using it and applying it has been blind for certain elements because of we started to believe the model and did not look at reality, like you said, like GDP. The GDP measurement is imperfect. It has many omissions. Now, that may be true, but we started to believe in the model. Like the model is the reality, but our model was imperfect, and has led to a number of distortions under which climate change. But we also saw that there is a growing gap between rich and poor. There is a high unemployment. There are other problems here. It's not only climate change. Continue. So basically, these are the problems, these are the challenges. What are we going to do about it?
There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history, and they're very interesting anthropologically because they share a common denominator. And that is, at a certain moment in time, 3 technologies emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform. That's a fancy way of saying a new infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic life. What are those 3 technologies? First, new communication technologies to allow us to more efficiently manage our economic activity. Second, new sources of energy to allow us to more efficiently power our economic activity. And third, new modes of mobility, transportation, logistics, to allow us to more efficiently move the economic activity. So when communication revolutions join with new energy regimes and new modes of transportation, it does change the way we manage, power, and move economic life. It changes temporal spatial orientation. It changes our habitats. It allows us to integrate in larger units. It actually even changes consciousness and governance. Let me give you 2 examples. First Industrial Revolution, 19th century. Second Industrial Revolution, 20th century. The Brits took us into the First Industrial Revolution. And first it was a communication revolution. They invented steam-powered printing. No more manual print presses. Steam-powered printing was a big leap forward because it allowed us to mass-produce very cheap print quickly. Then, in the second half of the 19th century, the Brits lay out a telegraph system across the British Isles. Steam-powered printing and the telegraph, those communication technologies, then converged with a completely new source of energy in Britain called coal. But how were they going to take that coal and harvest it? They invented the steam engine. And this is ingenious. They figured out that they should put the steam engine on rails for locomotives, national transport, logistics. Urban life, the Industrial Revolution, steam power. Second Industrial Revolution, the United States. Centralized electricity, and especially the telephone. I know we think the internet's a big deal, but the telephone was a really big deal. All of a sudden, people could communicate at vast distances at the speed of light. Later, radio and television. These communication technologies converged in the United States with a completely new energy source. Cheap Texas oil. Then Henry Ford put everybody on the road with cars, buses, and trucks. The Second Industrial Revolution changed the way we manage, power, and move economic life. That Second Industrial Revolution took us through the 20th century. It took the whole world through the 20th century, and it peaked in July 2008.
Okay, so he's talking about an infrastructure of communication technology, energy source, and transportation. In the first industrial revolution, the communication infrastructure was steam-powered printing and the telegraph, combined with coal as a new source of energy, and the steam engine that was also used to for logistics, so for ships and for railroad transportation. Then the second industrial revolution, radio, television, powered by oil, and transportation of cars, buses, and trucks. So that one took us to 19. So this is basically, when did it come to a halt? That's interesting. 2008. What happened in the year 2008?
All right, welcome back to the show here. Oil to 147. We went. Remember that month? on world markets. And when it hit that record price, the whole global economy shut down, silence, completely gone. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was the aftershock.
Mayhem, carnage, and bloodbath. Call it what you want, but what we saw on global stock markets today was ill-disguised panic.
Good evening. This was the day after what may someday be called Black Monday on Wall Street because it was perhaps the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression.
Our policy leaders are still dealing with the aftershock, not the earthquake. Why was it the earthquake? Because the entire industrial revolution that we've gone through is all dependent on the carbon deposits of a previous period in history. You know, if we look back, let's say that we make it through this next period of history. I always wonder, what will future generations think of us maybe in 100,000 years from now? They'll say, oh yes, we remember them. There was the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. These were the fossil fuel people. They dug up the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era and created a short-lived, dramatic, and very dangerous civilization.
So what he's saying is that it was not the financial crisis. Prior to the financial crisis, actually the financial crisis, the housing crisis, was the aftermath of the big shock. And the real shock was the oil price going up to $147, making the economy collapse. So we are currently everybody's looking at the financial crisis, financial crisis as the reason for the global economic slowdown, but it was actually not the financial crisis. The financial crisis was caused by a rise in the oil prices.
Why financial crisis caused by oil prices?
Basically because the economy came to a halt, and all of a sudden the fragile markets and were very. At that time, we were in a very big speculative bubble, and but with that, people started to diversify into the oil, and driving up the oil price even further. So when the economy came to a halt, when the oil price came to 147, so okay, well, this is crazy. And then things started to turn around. And when that happened, the hyperinflated housing market also came under fire. But that was triggered by the enormous increase in the oil price.
Really? So enormous increase of oil price caused boost of real estate costs?
No. The boost of real estate cost, that basically that was because there was too much credit in the market.
Too much lending money.
Right, too much lending money. So that is that's something that happened, obviously, but the bigger.
Let me try to remember. Why housing loan collapsed?
Okay, that had to do with so basically looking at it in isolation. Very simply put, is that basically what happened is that in the housing market, a bubble was created.
I remember they cannot pay money for.
Right, so they were extending loans to whoever, whether they had a good credit history, whether they had a stable source of income. It didn't matter, because the idea was that housing prices will never go down. Houses are basically a stable source of wealth.
Housing prices going down.
Basically, what happened is that they gave loans to a lot of people, because whenever you could give a loan, they had these financial instruments that you put bad loans together with good loans, and you would launder them, and they became a Actually, there is a brilliant. I don't know what time is it. There is a brilliant English sketch about what is the global financial crisis by two British people. It gives exactly what caused the housing crisis. It's very funny.
Why housing price
Increased?
No, decreased. Right.
So basically, what happened is that people, all of a sudden, when the economy came to a halt 2 months before, all of a sudden, people started to panic and started to default. At that moment, the economy came to a standstill. Then the uncertainty was there, and people were already over their heads. When the economy turned around, people started to default on their houses. They could not repay their loans. The bank said, well, okay, if you can't repay the loan, sorry, we need to take your house.
Why house price so steeping down?
Because they gave houses, the housing price increased, right? Because everybody could get credit. So the demand for houses increased. So the housing prices started to go up and up and up and up. Right? Then, all of a sudden, when the economy turned around, people were not able to pay back their loans anymore. Right? So they lost their job, and then yeah, okay, so I cannot pay for the mortgage anymore. Well, says the bank who gave them the loan, that's no problem. We will impound your house, and that's it. Basically, we just sell it. But there were so many people who lost their jobs, and so many people who defaulted because they got loans that were way bigger
Why
than
does America just happen that kind of situation?
Well, in America, that's
Rent too much?
yeah, but it was not only America; it was also in Europe. I remember very clearly that when I
Really?
yeah, in the Netherlands we had I was working for a company, and I think it was around 2000, maybe 4.
Right.
A colleague of mine, he went to the bank to get a loan for a house, and he wanted to know how much mortgage he could get. And the bank told him, well, you can get this mortgage. And he got furious. He got furious. But normal people say, okay, they got furious because they don't get enough money. He got furious because the bank offered him so much money. He said, what you're doing here is criminal. You are giving me a loan that is completely disproportionate with my income, with my situation. This is absolutely criminal what you're doing. I was very surprised because that was not something that you would hear normally from other people. They say, okay, well, if I can get the loan, I will take the loan, and we
Now it's a very similar situation. Interest rate is very low,
right.
and they can borrow the $1 million US, and paying rent is very few, so they can buy house.
Right.
But
But what happens if the interest goes up?
it goes up in the next several years.
Housing prices go down. You get a mortgage for $1 million. Your housing price decreases to 500,000,
Yeah.
and you have a debt of 500,000.
Yeah, next 5 years, some kind of situation will happen. Right?
Right. So at the moment, buying a house is very, very dangerous because there is a very big chance that your house will get underwater. Underwater is an expression that we use in the Netherlands. That means that basically,
What's the relationship you said dollar? No. Oil price and
the relationship between the oil price. So everybody's looking at 2008 as the year that the financial crisis happened. That the financial crisis is the reason that the economy came to a standstill. No.
it's different from oil price, right?
Yes, but what Rifkin says is that it was not the housing crisis. The housing crisis was the aftershock. What really stopped the American economy was the oil price rising to a level that was so high that all of a sudden the economy came to a standstill, that people started to lose their jobs. When they lost their jobs...
But this phenomenon is coincidental.
It's basically it's cause and effect. Everybody feels that the cause was the housing crisis. No, the effect was the housing crisis. The cause was the oil price. That's what he's claiming.
Oil price?
Right. The oil price raised to 147, and that was just too high. And then all of a sudden, people started to say, "Well, fuck it. This is ridiculous." And the economy came to a standstill. because the economy came to a standstill, people started to lose their jobs. Because people started to lose their jobs, all of a sudden a lot of houses came on the market. And that basically we got into a tailspin. It's like, mentally, yeah. But basically, mentally, we also got to these enormous heights. So, what Rifkin is saying here is that, okay, we all think that the housing crisis was the cause of the financial crisis was the cause of the global economic slowdown, but actually it was not the housing crisis. The housing crisis was just triggered by the oil price. Okay?
It's all about fossil fuels. Our fertilizers and pesticides are made out of fossil fuels. Our construction materials are made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceutical products are made out of fossil fuels. Our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, our heat lights, all moved by fossil fuels. So when the price of oil goes over around 95 a barrel, all the other prices go up. When we get into the zone of around 115 a barrel, prices become so high that purchasing power slows. This is the sunset of a great industrial era. Now, you remember in 2009, oil went down to 50 a barrel because
this is the sunset of an industrial era. That means that basically we are approaching the end of an era. Basically, we are reaching the borders of how far we can still go and grow within the boundaries of our platform. Our platform being basically based on a platform based on industrial fuels, combustion engine combined with communication technology, radio, television, and oil.
The economy had shut down. There was no activity. In 2010, we tried to regrow inventories, so oil prices started to go up. All the other prices started to go up. And in 2014, we hit a new peak of 114 or 15 a barrel. Purchasing power slowed down again. This is a convulsion of growth, shutdown, growth, shutdown.
So that's the graph that I showed, right? So basically, the economy grows, the oil price grows with it, grows exponential, and then at the moment it goes beyond 115 a barrel, the economy comes to a standstill. Then the oil price goes down, and when the price is that low enough, we start to grow again. But there is always this artificial break on the economic growth, which is the oil.
And the only reason oil went down in the last few years to 30 a barrel is now the fossil fuel industry is fighting among themselves in the sunset. OPEC said, we're going to keep the oil spigot open. We're going to flood the world with oil. And that's going to take the price down to 30 a barrel and wipe out our new competitors, the more exotic fossil fuels, shale gas in the U.S., tar sands in Canada. And guess what? They wiped them out. Only took a year and a half. Bankruptcies across the United States in the shale gas industry. And now tar sands in Canada. The pipeline's not happening. And do you hear anybody talking about energy independent right now? It's over. And as soon as the bankruptcies complete themselves, the oil prices are now starting to go back up. But now we have failed states. Where there's oil production, we have failed states. So this is a volatile, convulsive sunset over the next 40 to 50 years, an unstable world. Where do we head from here? Let me share an anecdote. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy on her watch. Now remember, in terms of per capita, Germany is the most robust capitalist market economy in the world. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new Chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how are you going to grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged into a platform, an infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport, and that infrastructure peaked in its productivity in Germany years ago. Let me talk about productivity.
So that's
rise to a much more profound crisis. Let me share an anecdote.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy on her watch. Now remember, in terms of per capita, Germany is the most robust capitalist market economy in the world. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new Chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how are you going to grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged into a platform, an infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport, and that infrastructure peaked in its productivity in Germany years ago? I mean,
So basically, we were talking about the Industrial Revolution. There's actually three technologies that came together, like the infrastructure, communication infrastructure, energy sources, and transportation. He says, okay, well, basically, if you want to grow your economy, like the United States tried, we see that you get stuck. You hit a ceiling because of the oil price and the communication infrastructure. The combustion technology that is prevalent in Germany. So what he raised, the question that he raised, okay, we are living in this second generation industrial era, driven by oil, with internal combustion engines and radio, and we see that if we try to grow in that it will have a result in we will reach the ceiling quickly because of that infrastructure. So his argument being that basically Germany, if they want to keep growing, they will need to develop a new infrastructure.
Why she successful? When she going to start this
Right, he yeah, the rest of it, we still have 1 hour and 24 minutes.
Why German success? Okay, we're going to explain.
Yes, yeah.
we talk about productivity. This is crucial. Our economists are lamenting, they're asking, why has productivity been declining for 20 years? We have all these new killer products coming out of Silicon Valley. Why is productivity declining? I'm going to share with you a dirty little secret in economics that economists don't like to talk about. We used to believe that there are two factors that drive productivity in standard economic theory: better machines and better performing workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for Economic Growth Theory in the mid-1980s, he actually let the little secret out. He said, we've got a problem here. When we trace every single year of the Industrial Revolution, these two factors, better machines, better workers, it only accounts for about 14% of the productivity. So Robert Solow asked the big question, where's the other 86% of productivity come from? Don't know. Moses Abramowitz, the former head of the American Economic Association, said, quote, this is a measure of our ignorance. Now, wouldn't you think economists would know where productivity comes from because that's the basis of the discipline? Here's why they don't know. When classical economic theory was penned in the late 1700s, the vogue was Newton's physics. Newton was the big guy in town. Everybody wanted to use Newton's metaphor so they could be more scientific because he had discovered the laws that run the universe, supposedly. The economists also fell in line. For example, you know Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction? Adam Smith borrowed that metaphor for his invisible hand of supply and demand. For every action on the supply side, there's an equal and opposite reaction on the demand side. Newton's law, a body in motion stays in motion unless disrupted. Baptists say borrowed that metaphor, the French economist. And he suggested that, well, supply will stimulate demand, which will generate supply, which will stimulate demand unless disrupted. All of our economic theory, if you go back and take a look at it, it's all based on Newton's metaphors in physics. There's only one problem with this. Newton's physics has absolutely nothing to do with economics. Nothing. Nothing. Economics is governed by the same laws that govern the universe, the solar system, the biosphere on Earth, and every single thing you and I do in our economic life while we're here on this planet. Here are the two laws that govern everything in the universe, including our economy. The first law of energy says all the energy in the universe is constant since the Big Bang. No new energy has been created, no energy has been destroyed since the Big Bang. That's the conservation law. The second law of energy says that's true, that the energy isn't created or destroyed, but it always changes form, but only in one direction. From concentrated, the Big Bang, to dispersed through the galaxies. From hot to cooled off through the galaxies. From order to disorder. From available to unavailable. Entropy is a measure of the energy that's still there, but not available to do useful work. There are three systems that we can talk about in thermodynamics. An open system that exchanges matter and energy with the outside world. A closed system which exchanges energy with the outside world, but doesn't exchange matter. And an isolated system which doesn't exchange matter or energy with the outside world. The Earth, in relation to the solar system and sun, is being. We get plenty of energy from the sun. We don't have to worry about this for billions of years. But in terms of the fixed matter on this planet, we don't have a lot of additional matter coming down here. We get a few meteorites and little cosmic dust, but whatever we have in terms of fixed matter, which is a form of energy, has been here since we blew off the sun and cooled off. All of you have smartphones on you right now, and there are little granules of rare earths in those phones. They've been here since the Earth has been here. That's a form of energy. It's a material form. So, here's what economics is all about. We extract low entropy available energy in nature, a rare earth, a metallic ore, a fossil fuel. We extract it, and then through our value chains, we store it, we ship it, we produce goods and services from it, we consume it, we recycle it back to nature. Those are value chains. At every step of conversion, when we take nature's resources and move it through society, at every step of conversion, we have to embed energy into that good or service to get it to the next stage of what it becomes. But we lose some energy in the process of that conversion. This is called aggregate efficiency in economics. Aggregate efficiency is the ratio of the potential work versus the actual useful work you actually embed in the good or service. Let me give you an example. Nature has the same economic conditions that we have in our human economy. If a lion chases down an antelope in the wild and kills it, about 10 to 20% of the total energy that's in that antelope gets embedded into the lion. The rest is heat loss in the conversion. That's the aggregate efficiency. What does this have to do with my conversation with the Chancellor of Germany?
So, are you familiar with this? So basically,
I don't understand what is aggregate economy.
So basically, what he's getting at is that why did our economy decline? Basically, he says it's heat loss. We are what the economic theory is ignoring, since actually there was a French school, the mercantilist, who actually said, okay, the only source of added value in the economy is actually land, meaning actually the sun, the energy that the sun gives to grow crops, and we are basically we are more or less keepers of the earth, agriculture. But that's pre-industrial era. What he is talking about is that the laws of energy says, okay, the energy that we have on this planet is a constant, but it transforms. So since the Big Bang, no new energy has been created or has been lost, but it changes form and shape. It changes from concentrated to dispersed. It changes from order to disorder, and the way that we are losing efficiency, effectiveness of energy is it's called entropy. So entropy means that basically is the loss of effectiveness. So low entropy. He mentioned the low entropy resources. Low entropy resources means that high potential resources like oil. It has a lot of energy, and it drives the So it can be used as a fuel. So we have been using these fuels, this energy, to drive our production. Right. So the example of the lion who's chasing the antelope, basically the lion needs food in order to survive, but the energy that he gets from eating that antelope is only 20% energy will be transformed. 20% of the total energy in that antelope will go to the lion. The lion needs that, but actually, as a whole, 80% of the antelope is basically lost. It's the same in production. So if we go to production process, we use energy to create a product, to maybe grow the raw material, to transport it from A to B. Every step takes energy, and we lose that energy. So that is not in our economic model. It's not in our economic model. And that also explains that why the GDP actually has been growing, productivity has not been growing so much, but we have just been adding more energy into our production process.
She's a physicist, you know, by background. So here's what I said to her.
Merkel.
We started the second industrial revolution in 1905 in the United States with 3% aggregate efficiency. Every conversion of nature's resources through the value chains, we lost about 97%. It didn't get into the product or service. By 1990, the U.S. got up to about 14% aggregate efficiency. That was our ceiling. Nothing's changed since then. And I reported to the Chancellor that Germany got up to about 18.5% aggregate efficiency. That was their ceiling. Nothing's changed. Anybody want to guess which country led the world in aggregate efficiency? Japan. 20% aggregate efficiency, 1990s, reached its ceiling. What I'm saying to the Chancellor is this. You can have market reforms, labor reforms, monetary reforms. You can create incentives for killer new products. You can try to create 1 million Steve Jobs. It won't make a damn bit of difference. If your businesses are still plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure, you can't get above the ceiling of 20% aggregate efficiency anywhere in the world. Why is this important? A new generation of economists who happen to study physics have gone back and looked at the industrial record, and they added a third factor to productivity. Better machines, better workers, aggregate efficiency. The ratio of yes, it's so obvious, the ratio of potential to useful work. When they put in that third factor, it accounts for much of the rest of productivity. Henry Ford could have told you this. In fact, every engineer could have told you this. Every architect could have told you this. Every biologist could have told you this. Every chemist could have told you this. They all have to start their training in school by learning these two laws of energy that govern the universe. I teach in the oldest business school in the world. I taught the advanced management program at the Wharton School for 15 years. Not a single business school in the world today, right now, requires that you learn about the first and second laws of thermodynamics that govern economic activity. How shameful is this? So, in that first day with the Chancellor, we discussed the third industrial revolution. A new convergence of communication, energy, and transportation to manage, power, and move Germany.
So, basically, since we are in the ceiling with our infrastructure, the second.
You said the labor and machine productivity, and third one is
communication, transportation, and energy.
No. Just productivity increase is okay. Just beforehand, just she showed.
Yeah.
Workers and machines and one more.
Aggregate efficiency. Aggregate efficiency.
What is it?
Aggregate efficiency is basically the loss
Japan
of
20 and
so the loss of energy. So basically, the aggregate efficiency, if we want to basically for the aggregate efficiency is that the way that we use our natural resources. Like for example, let's say the natural resource is oil. So we waste at the beginning of the century, 1905, we wasted about 97% of the potential energy of oil to in our product. So 90%, 97% of the potential of energy remained unused, but was wasted in the production process.
But why he's talking about relating productivity?
Well, basically, so the problem with productivity at the moment, why productivity is not growing, is because we are actually using a lot of energy in the process, right? In productivity. But it stays outside of the model, because the production model was always focuses on labor and on capital, not on energy. But energy is actually very important in our production function. So if we include energy in the model,
is this relating to the productivity increase?
Yes.
But this is not calculated into GDP.
Exactly. So that is a big miss. That's a big miss in the economic theory. And you remember our discussion about that's how I got on this, because I was also curious, because the donut woman, she was also talking about energy as the main driver of productivity. I said, what's she talking about?
But my curiosity is, it's weird. You told me that no increase of productivity, right?
Right.
No increased productivity is because of the workers and machines. That's only the 14% of the
because we need too much energy, and we are using energy that is finite, right? So we're using oil that is finite, that has a limited capacity.
Wait a minute, I understand energy should be considered for the future,
right,
into GDP.
Right.
But your explanation beforehand,
right,
why productivity is not increasing? Because workforce, machine is those two of those increase productivity,
right,
but just only impact for the 14% of GDP.
right.
But he doesn't explain what is the remaining 84%.
So that is basically, that's energy.
84% energy?
That's energy efficiency. That's lost, because but what happens if we increase our production? We waste.
GDP base is machine and labor 84%.
So basically, our increase in productivity is only explained for 14%, or in Japan's case, so a higher productivity of our labor, and so working more efficient, working a higher output, or for additional capital. But 80% is unexplained. That's all the heat loss that we are generating while we are increasing our production.
What I don't understand is what is the basis of calculation for productivity? Okay. Explain. No increase, but what is the ingredient of productivity?
Productivity basically is our output, right? So we exclude the.
What is the equation? My question.
So GDP. Well, GDP is what we
productivity.
Productivity. That's labor.
3%, or
right?
1%, 2%, and recently productivity is almost 1%, 2%, right? What is the
productivity growth? So the output per worker, the total output that you generate. So the total basically.
But he said there's workers and machines in total 14% of total.
Now that's energy efficiency. So we have the traditional economy, the economic theory, right? And basically that says, okay, we can explain everything in production as the combination effort, the combined effort of capital and labor. That's it. But if we look at the actual output and we look at the changes in input, then we can actually only see that there is only a small percentage that we can explain by the increase in output by capital and labor. So there's something is missing. Something is missing in the equation.
No, my question is, what is the equation of productivity? just
That's what I'm
1%.
saying. So the equation of productivity, according to Solow, but we have many different equations of productivity.
But it's based on you show me the graph, right?
Right.
That graph, what is the equation?
What is productivity? Is the output, total output in the economy. So national product is national income. Right?
Or what is the impact by workers and machines?
Right. So how much of that, what can we
What is the other element?
Only labor and capital.
But he said 14%.
Can explain that. So if we look at, okay, so...
He said, why productivity does not increase? Because machine and the worker just only 14% impact of productivity, he said, right?
Yes, can be explained by that, because the correlation between the productivity increase and the actual GDP.
He said energy, but
Right.
I think that makes sense. You format this video, but you show me the graph, right?
Right.
That graph is the content energy?
No. Wait. We're talking about different. No. We're talking about something completely different. We are talking about the correlation between the input and output and how that relates to our GDP. So there is a discrepancy. They try to see. Okay, you have this theory, right? So there's labor productivity and there's capital productivity, and then we're trying to see. Okay, how does that actually?
Oh, you're talking about former graph shows that capital productivity no growth.
Right.
Yeah,
there is
labor efficiency or machine efficiency.
Right.
But
So labor productivity actually there's no growth, but we still see.
Okay, now he's talking about different definition.
Right. So basically, what he's saying is that okay, when we include, and there is actually I found a video, and I don't know whether you're interested in it.
Different. Okay, just completely different, right?
But it's a very complicated one.
Yeah, it's complicated, okay, but it doesn't make sense. It's a formal explanation, your explanation, and his video is different, right?
No. No.
That's right, I'm confused.
No, it's not different. We are talking what he's talking about. So basically, what I try to show is that we are expecting that technology will drive our productivity and therefore it will drive our income, right? That's the assumption that we have. That's why economies will grow, because we saw that in the past. What I was talking about, the case that I'm trying to make, is that we saw that because productivity is not everything, but it almost determines anything. That was the first slide, right? Then, looking at the past, we see that productivity is actually we see that productivity has been rising in the first industrial revolution, the second.
Okay, I understand. And just I try to check just move.
Okay.
Just move. Okay, just move.
Solow, SOLOW.
No, I'm talking about productivity.
That's labor productivity, and there's capital productivity. Right. Productivity. There's labor productivity.
This guy is not right.
Shall I give you, because I actually have it in a slide here.
No, I need an equation.
Right. This is the productivity function.
No, I need equation.
So labor is a function of capital, labor, and technological progress.
No. Could you show me what is a mother and child equation? What is the mother? Okay, mother is labor and raw material and capital, and child is profit and interest and revenue. Must be. I need what kind of calculation they are doing. They are not right. This is
You want a GDP function or a productivity function?
productivity. Equation.
So that's this one.
I'm productivity equation.
So we measure the output in GDP, right?
No, not GDP.
Yeah, we do measure the output in GDP.
This is productivity equation. They're not labor.
Here. So we'll assume the very basic model of annual aggregate output over the year. F, he said that the output quantity would be governed by the amount of capital and the amount of labor and the productivity of that labor. He thought that the productivity of labor was the factor driving long
They had some cartoon. Oh my god. Was that any cartoon? This one. Why everybody English speaking people is trying to make bad explanation? Yes, that one, but this is what is a K?
K is capital.
A.
A is a technology.
Yeah.
Labor.
Oh, it's too much simplified. Not good. Okay, try to say this. Okay, I show you something. Okay. Japanese very clear. Productivity, there. Production quantity, sales volume, profit, value added. And this is
Yeah, that's GDP.
output.
Yeah.
And this is the component is employees, hour, wages, equipment, how many equipment do they have? Fixed assets,
That's capital.
raw material.
That's capital, yeah.
Yeah, this is, I think we need to show this kind of explanation instead of just capital. This is not right. Capital is very difficult to understand. This one is okay. Capital including workforce. Okay.
No, capital doesn't
No,
include.
this one is including
Right, okay,
employees,
so inputs.
okay.
Basically, it's outputs,
Employees
the
and-
inputs.
how many man works, how many machine works, and cost of wages, and including equipment, how many equipment do you have, and fixed asset, and raw material. She
So-
said 7,
Output divided by input,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's what they say.
and also the child is volume of production, and sales revenue and profit and value added. Okay, so for item is this is result, and this is a child, and production component is mother. This is a productivity. He said.
Yeah, it's this
And
output
this
divided
one
by
is
input.
understandable.
Output divided by input.
Huh?
Output divided by input.
Oh yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So how many
So this
inputs
is-
of all the
okay,
production
this is-
factors?
This is.
But what is production
I
factor?
understand why 3% increase is might be global level. Why? Sales profit is drastically increasing year by year, but is capital is also increasing.
Capital is increasing.
So capital increase and also sales and profit increasing is coincidentally same level. It means nothing changed, no productivity.
Right. Productivity doesn't change. So what you would expect is with growth of productivity means that with the same number of people input, with the same number of laborers, we would still be, and we would actually be able to grow our output because we start to work smarter, we start to have access to better technology, and that would result in a higher output. But the reality is that even basically our output per worker doesn't increase.
By the way, I didn't study about productivity, how to increase productivity. I didn't study before, so I don't know what this means. Actually, beforehand I just study or learn or heard how to increase productivity.
Right.
Okay, this is a kind of sort of common sense.
Right.
And if you're doing work, doing something,
Right.
how to improve productivity.
Right.
But your explanation is no increase of productivity in the past 20 years or so
Right.
forth, right?
In the next 20 years.
Next 20 years. So this one is that the reason why I don't understand. Maybe just I understand equation. So it means definition of productivity itself is maybe something misunderstanding before, like a labor productivity or asset in productivity may be different. Labor productivity is 100% for sure increasing. Right. So.
Yeah. So what's happening is that we see that our economy, what they want to grow, we increase, right? We have technology, we have this output, but it's not translating because wages are not growing. So basically, wages are not growing. Then we see that we have an increase in GDP in products, but then the oil price kicks in and puts the economy to a halt. So the economy is actually not growing.
Okay, my question is, if so,
Right.
AI and robotics will not improve productivity.
Exactly.
Why? This
Because-
is exactly asked here.
Right.
But why
Right.
Why?
So basically, it will increase output, but with increase in the economy, with an increase, we are more capable of doing more things and creating more output. But that growth in the economy will actually lead to a surge in the prices of our natural resources, and that will put that growth to a halt, and that will bring the economy to a halt, like it did in 2008, because basically outside of this whole technology, because it has the potential to do that, right? But because of everything, because of our infrastructure, because of our internal combustion infrastructure, plus our like oil dependency, our fossil fuel dependency, it will lead to when this increases automatically with it, and it will start to collide.
But just consider for outsourcing. Automatically 30% increase of productivity.
Right.
So they're going to force them to cost cut of the company, right?
Right. So what you will go, and then we will look at that. We will go into a close to marginal costs. We will basically go to a zero marginal costs economy. Zero marginal cost economy. So basically, when we're looking at the future, and we have these technologies, if we want to expand, let's say, for example, in 20 years ago, if I wanted to sell a product worldwide, I needed to buy advertisement space in all the new newspapers, right? And then set up marketing agency and local presence and everything. Today, I open one website. I use the entire infrastructure that is already available to me at almost zero cost.
Yeah.
So I can grow my market reach.
Yeah.
So you see that the marginal cost of actually expanding your bringing
cost down.
Oh, it's almost going to zero. So what does that go? What's that going to? What's
This is productivity increase, right?
Right, but the thing is that we are stuck in this old infrastructure, and that will prevent us. That will basically, whenever we try to go up, it will bring us down. So his message is that we need to change our infrastructure in order to reap the benefits of our productivity growth. So the potential of productivity growth, we are stuck in an old infrastructure, oil, combustion engine, and that will basically cause us to come to a halt, because when one side goes up, speculation and demand will increase the demand for oil and for other fossil fuels. When that happens, the prices will go up, uncertainty will kick in, and demand will immediately cool off, and we will not be able to reap the benefits of the technology that we are inventing. So we're stuck with an artificial brake on our economy, which is fossil fuels and the combustion engine.
By the way, if we're going to implement AI robotics, we can fire the employees 30%.
Right.
So employees.
Yeah, but what kind of effect?
Wages reducing.
Right.
The profit is increasing. So this is productivity increasing.
The productivity of capital will increase.
No. This is employees reduced, wages reduced, and
the output per worker will increase.
output increase.
Yes.
So productivity increase. Why you said no increase?
Well, basically, what it means that when that happens, the question is, will our GDP actually rise? Because will there be demand for those products?
Productivity increase.
There is no labor. There's no labor. There will be no.
Extreme cases. No employees, no wages,
Right.
and no equipment, but sales.
Right. So how are we going to feed our people? How are we going to feed all those people? Are we going to redistribute it?
Unemployment, so they're going to might be basic income.
Might be. But do you think that
Government will pay.
But how will the government get the money? You think
Oh,
that?
you mean this is productive in all total in all nation?
Exactly, because our productivity is measured as the outputs as the GDP, but the GDP will come to a standstill because the prices will go up, so demand will go down.
Even if company improve their efficiency.
So you need to take
it doesn't matter because we need to consider for countrywide.
right the basic.
But it doesn't make sense much. It doesn't make sense much. Okay, unemployment ratio is high because of the need to hire people.
Well, basically, Uno-san, like what happens, like if we forget about the physical output, and we're not looking at the physical output, we're looking at GDP, at the how is the economy
okay,
doing?
no. My question is, why, if so, why
Right.
you are talking about productivity of this definition?
Productivity is basically the output, right? But how do we measure output? As GDP, right?
Yeah, but you are talking about past 20 years no change, 20 years, next 20 years no change, but GDP is growing every year. But okay, so far. But why are you talking about productivity? We don't need to talk about productivity. Already.
No, so there is. Yeah, so that's why we're saying that GDP measurement is imperfect.
Not only GDP, but also productivity that's useless. What I'm talking about, useless.
So GDP, what I'm saying is that GDP will not grow very
Understand,
rapidly, even
understand.
though productivity will grow.
Understand, but productivity just.
So the physical productivity, ne?
You show the graph productivity, right?
Yes, Uno-san, no.
No. Well, okay, my question.
You're making a mistake in thinking.
No, your question is, your slide.
Yes.
Okay, your slide, productivity.
Right.
Why that kind of productivity slide we're going to prepare? What objective? What is the purpose? I don't understand.
We are thinking that productivity grows, right? We think the productivity, the technology will enable productivity, and that will lead us to higher incomes. But what we see is actually that's not happening. Why? That's the question. So you need to differentiate between the physical output and the GDP output. Basically, that's how we measure it, right? So we measure GDP as a financial value, as the sum of consumption and investment and government spending and imports, import-export. So that's GDP. Now we are in agreement that GDP is changing rapidly. That's because how we assign value to it. That's the price times product. Now the product, we can see that there definitely is an increase in output per product, but the prices will change dramatically because of the way that our economy works. So when we are talking about GDP, we're talking about the way that we measure it. When we're talking about output, then we see that the output per worker is actually dramatically increasing with AI and IoT and all these things. So the thing is that GDP and our physical output, the way that we are capable of generating more stuff and better stuff, and the way that translates into our economy is actually not going, because our monetary system doesn't allow us to grow. Doesn't mean that we're not making more stuff, but our GDP will not grow indefinitely. Will stay very stagnant. So you see the difference between the two? It's the physical productivity and the productivity as we measure it as GDP, output per head, measured in GDP. Now, why do we say that the GDP is imperfect and we only captures about 14-15% of the value? Is that we cannot explain that.
Okay,
why do we make so much more stuff, and why do we? Is our GDP not growing?
GDP is insufficient for the element. I understand. But
Exactly.
productivity, why we're going to discuss this kind of definition, define productivity? This is I don't understand. Why this define productivity?
Because there is a missing factor. There is a missing factor here. There is something very important here. That infrastructure, that technology.
So, okay, it means GDP definition wrong, productivity definition wrong.
Right, but it's wrong. No, we need to take it in consideration, and then we will see that we live in a.
Okay, the other way. Useless. This kind
imperfect.
of impact. That's right.
Right, imperfect.
Okay, I understand. So
Imperfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next week you are going to continue this video.
Right.
And we'll
Right.
discuss later,
Yes.
right? And what is the focal point is, okay, now GDP we need to consider, just you said, energy.
Right.
And for example, utility.
Not only energy, actually, it will mean a lot. The technology in itself will mean that basically we're going to organize in a different way,
climate change.
in a different society.
Climate change.
Yes, climate change will be something that we need to address, but there will be a lot of other things that will change, also for Japan.
Okay, I understand.
So yeah. So I think it's a very interesting point because it basically questions a lot of things. And
Okay,
why?
I understand. So far in the history, you think GDP, you are thinking productivity.
Right.
That is, you think yourself, but it's not accurate.
Exactly. So our minds are completely conditioned by the models that we have invented to describe the reality, but we forgot to look at the reality and only look at the models to indicate what we should do, and we are ignoring a lot of things that are very, very important. For example, the technology. For example, the way that our environment. Those are not part of the models, and therefore they stay out of our consideration. And this is actually, I would believe that this is more a fault that we can trace back to Western culture than we can trace in Japan. There's a very strong belief in models in the Western world, much less so in Japan.
If so, I think if you consider for China, current, for example, Chinese airport and airport population, family influx is Japanese Narita airport. China is 20 airport. Each of those is almost supersede Narita airport. It means their influx numbers 20 times bigger than Japan. Okay? A simple comparison. People moving 20 times bigger than. Of course, they have another 80 airports, okay? But we don't exclude Japan, Haneda, only Narita are small.
Right.
But there, China is the same size of Narita airport size is 20 or more. So just simple comparison, they have 10 times bigger than us. Even current GDP is 5 times, but actually 10 times bigger than us. Okay, it's double, currently double. What this means is bigger than United States. Simple comparison, right? So kind of, okay, how much they are utilized, you spending utility or oil,
Right.
or transportation, like an airport.
It's almost 50%.
This sort of calculation we have never done it before.
They actually do it. There are numbers there. I came across it. The amount of energy consumed by China is really enormous if you look at it.
So it means military is very easy to compare.
But for China, this is actually a problem. And if you look at changing this infrastructure in China, they're moving so incredibly fast in changing this, much faster than Western society, because, well, basically their energy infrastructure is completely outdated. So for them, it's a and they can do it centralized, right? They can say, okay, we just dictate this to happen, and then it happens. Unlike democracy, where you have all kind of rent seeking and democratic.
Okay, democracy is another issue, but I don't believe democracy is the best. Okay, so if you consider social everything, economy, politics, social community, or everything else, and what's going on now, or 10 years later, what's happening, this is very important. Currently, we are defined all the traditional measurement, so we cannot accurately judge which country is strong, right? So you are trying to talk about. I understand what you mean. So we need to discuss more next week. It's a very interesting issue.
So I'm actually thinking about Monday. What shall we do on Monday? Because Monday we last Monday we didn't have a meeting. Did we?
Continue.
Okay.
I'm going to ask
Takashi.